Charles Purcell presents.
This is Charles Purcell, and it's the weekend, so I'm going to do a silly show. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to play some excerpts, some clips from Thursday's The Log that were left on the cutting room floor because we ran out of time. And I recorded almost twice as much show as I needed. So we're going to do that. I'm also going to tell you right now about some stories and thoughts that we didn't have time for, or maybe one or two that happened since that recording. And under the whole thing today, we're going to add some silly music because it's the weekend and because we just have to let our hearts be silly sometimes. Okay? So, excerpts that were left on the cutting room floor from Thursday's episode, a couple of stories, and this music. Hit it. Okay, that's pretty good, right? That sounds pretty appropriate. You like that? All right, a couple of things. Well, the first thing I have to mention is the guy who fainted in the Oval Office. A big pharma executive fainted. And you all saw the story. You all saw the picture. Oh, shoot. I was going to get the credit to the guy. You know what? Let's go to the information machine right now, and we'll find out who took that photograph, because the person has to get credit. It's the picture of the year, maybe the picture of the decade. I can just do it right here on my phone. Let's go to Perplexity, and we'll just enter that picture. Who took this picture? You like the music? I do too. I love it. All right, Perplexity. Perplexity is going to answer the question here. Oval Office photo. This picture was taken by Andrew Harnik of Getty Images. Andrew Harnik of Getty Images. This man needs credit every time. And boy, it's a shame. Nobody's giving him credit. This photo was instantly iconic. Every news outlet, every platform, every late night comic, everybody talked about this photo. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll be shocked. The guy fainted. A few people rushed over to help. For some reason, RFK Jr. literally ran out of the room. He didn't just walk. He had a hop in his step. The second it happened, before the guy hit the floor, RFK was out of the room. Now, I'm not sure if he was pulling a George Costanza, pushing down the grandma to run out of the fire, or if he was maybe going to call 911. I don't know. You're in the White House, RFK. I don't think you need to do that. So I don't know what the deal was there, but he literally ran out of the room. Of course, the big story, and the reason the photograph is so amazing, the Orange Menace stands with his dead eyes, the sociopath that he is. It was crazy. You saw the photograph, right? My God. And what everybody picked up on immediately, you didn't have to be any kind of a genius. Everybody simultaneously picked up on it. Well, it's just the perfect metaphor. It's iconic. It's the orange meat puppet standing there staring into space because he's a complete and utter sociopathic moron, has no idea how to respond as a human being, while other people tend to this emergency. And of course, the metaphor being how he's treating the nation. He's just standing there waiting for problems to solve themselves, or not caring, or thinking other people will solve them, or just literally doesn't care or doesn't know that there is a problem. If we had the capability of knowing what was going through his mind as that photo was being taken, I don't think any of us would be surprised. Well, this is a pain in the ass. Well, okay, I guess it'll be over soon. I don't know. I wonder what's for dinner. I wonder what I'll put on my hamburger tonight. just the photograph of the year, of the decade, by Andrew Harnik of Getty Images. This guy needs to... shame on all the so-called journalists and even the late-night comics. Every one of them should have given this guy credit. Andrew Harnik, Getty Images, with the image of the year, of the decade. The other great story that fits in nicely with this music. In a minute, I'm going to play some excerpts from Thursday's show. Right now, I'm just doing some quick stories. The Sandwich Guy. The Sandwich Guy. Here again, I'm sure you had to hear this, right? You all know a few weeks ago during a protest, and there are all these ICE people on the street and Homeland Security and, the Stephen Miller Private Army Gestapo. And a protester threw a Subway sandwich, wrapped in paper, not a single ounce of ketchup or mustard or anything, actually hit the soldier, whoever he is, the ICE guy. Yeah, so he throws a sandwich and he runs and they arrest him. And Jeanine Pirro of Fox News fame, Judge Jeanine Pirro, who is now a U.S. attorney, of course, tries to pin felony assault charges on him. I mean, what? Of course, the grand jury refused to indict, so they kept trying. They tried to pin a lesser assault on him, misdemeanor assault, and the jury came back on that case and said, nah, you kidding? Of course not. Not guilty, innocent, get out of here, sorry for your time. So the whole thing is just hilarious. I'm sorry for the sandwich thrower who had his life inconvenienced, but I don't know, maybe he'll get a few podcast interviews out of it. He'll turn out all right. And he's a folk hero, and, there's the Banksy image of him. So the Sandwich Guy, acquitted, and a folk hero now to us all. That just happened. And we found a reason to buy a Subway sandwich. I mean, they're no good for eating, but apparently they're great for throwing. I think Subway should design a whole ad campaign around that. Well, of course, you don't want to eat our sandwiches, but they're the perfect thing for throwing at fascist thugs, at Stephen Miller's private domestic army. Yeah, Subway, get on that. Get your ad people working on that. You could call them Gestapo grenades. Perfect. All right, we're going over a couple quick stories. And we're going to play. In fact, you know what? Let's play a couple of clips right now from Thursday's show. And then I'll come back, depending on how much time we have. There's a couple stories that you need to hear. We didn't talk about the 60 Minutes interview that happened last Sunday. If you missed that, good for you. No reason to go back and see any of that. I can tell you that there were dozens of lies, obvious lies. Of course, somebody counted 28. That seems low. Or maybe that was just in the edited version. It was like an hour and a half total. What they played on the program, 60 Minutes, was, 35 minutes, something like that. I think the 28 lies were within just the edited on-air version. Number of fact checks in real time or even afterwards. That number would be 0. Yeah, CBS under the Ellison regime now, and with Barry Weiss as head of the news division, and Nora O'Donnell, who by all accounts seemed to be just kind of a run-of-the-mill standard network TV journalist, which didn't mean much in the first place, but it was better than this. No fact checks, no follow-ups, no pressure at all. Just allowed the orange meat puppet to lie to the American people over and over again, not challenge him. They didn't even really go to any trouble. Well, on the show, particularly, they went to no trouble at all to fact check him, even after the interview. Even afterwards, within the program, 0 fact checks. And then in the coverage afterwards, I don't know because I didn't see it all, but none that I heard of. In fact, no corporate outlets, the major networks, CNN, the rest of them, they spent very little time or effort, if any. All right. The people who call themselves leaders for some reason. Can you, just a side note here, quick side note. Can we all strike the word leader from our vocabulary entirely? I hate the word leader. Stop using it. They're not leaders, they're public servants. Public servants. Leader and leadership are perfectly good words. They're appropriate words in their place. But when you're talking about office holders, especially at a kind of a higher level, president, members of Congress, mayors of major cities, governors, stop calling them leaders. Get that. We have to do whatever we can to destroy that mindset. That's a worldview we have to just get rid of. And language is so powerful in shaping worldviews, in shaping subconscious understandings of things. You know, when you think you know something, you think you understand something, but you really don't know why? Well, it's because it's just been ingrained in your brain. And there's no more powerful tool than language. So I'm asking you to strike the word leader from your vocabulary forever if you're using it to describe public servants. That's the term. That's the term. Someone who really puts themselves out there and helps to inspire people. You know, there's an appropriate way to use the word leader. Martin Luther King was a leader. It implies that there's a movement. You have to have people to lead. And as he always did, he gave them credit because a leader is absolutely nothing without the people who follow. Okay, so the word itself has meaning. But when you use it as a label, as just a placeholder, as kind of a default term to describe people in government, it's just completely and entirely wrong and inappropriate. They are public servants. All right, okay, sorry, I ranted about that. A side note to my side note. I hate when people use the... Okay, this is really getting off the track, but I promise I'll come back. I can't stand it when people use the word skit in referring to comedy sketches. Again, it's just wrong, and it puts wrong ideas in your head. It minimizes, it diminishes. Children in grammar school put on skits. People at your office party put on skits. Professional comedians on professional stages write and perform sketches. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's just another illustration of how the power of language can shape how we think. They're not skits, they're sketches. Okay? That was definitely a side note of a side note. And my side note was, I gotta work my way back now through my side notes. Going back to Zoran for a minute, just a quick reminder that Emil Seidel, Daniel Hone, and Frank Zeidler did it first. They were the very great socialist mayors of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. From 1910 to 1960, that whole first half of the 20th century when Milwaukee was the greatest city in America. I won't go back into it. I won't bore you again with my love and adoration of the so-called sewer socialists of Milwaukee and Wisconsin. They were the pioneers. They did it first. They influenced the whole nation. They influenced FDR and the New Deal, public transportation, even government-run grocery stores. Everything that Zoran is today, the Milwaukee socialists did first. And again, it wasn't just here in Milwaukee. They had great representation over the state capitol in Madison. The sewer socialists had representation in Congress, the Wisconsin delegation in D.C. As I said, they influenced FDR and the New Deal. They were the best thing to happen in American politics in the 20th century and beyond. So if you haven't heard my previous sermons about the sewer socialists, or if you don't know what I'm talking about, please just look it up. Sewer Socialists of Wisconsin, or of Milwaukee, and just go down that rabbit hole of information. A wonderful story in American politics. Before we go, I want to make a quick comment about Dick Cheney, or as he pronounced his name, Dick Cheney. Did you know that? Yeah, it's actually pronounced Cheney, and there's just a handful of journalists who pronounce it that way. But I won't do that. Anyway, I just have some thoughts about when bad people die. I feel no obligation at all to say nice things about bad people when they die. Especially not public figures with immense power. I felt no obligation to say anything nice about Charlie Kirk. The nicest thing I said was, I'm sorry for his wife and kids and family. So I can say the same thing about Dick Cheney, or Dick Cheney. Sure, there were people who loved him. He had a family. He had friends. My condolences to them. But he was a bad guy. And this whitewashing, when people die, is just wrong. It's wrong because it's not true. Nothing wrong with a little white lie to make people feel better, but when we're talking about important, influential people who shaped our politics, who shaped policy, who shaped the culture in many cases, the first 24, 48 hours after a public figure dies is usually the last anybody will think about them. And it'll be the most influential 24, 48 hours about how they think about them. And so when it happens, we have to be honest for the sake of the country, for the sake of history. Going all the way back to the Iran-Contra scandal, when Dick Cheney was a member of Congress, he was the ranking member on the House Select Committee on Iran-Contra, and he defended Reagan. He defended Oliver North. He's been on the wrong side of everything. Let's go back earlier than that, when he was a young man. 5 deferments he got during Vietnam. So he's a chicken hawk. That's something important to remember about him. No more hawkish, war-mongering member of the W administration. And again, even before that, as a member of Congress. Yeah, he was a chicken hawk, and that's important to know. 5 deferments. He wasn't going to fight in Vietnam. No. He was the main architect of the so-called War on Terror. Millions of people died because of the illegal Iraq War. He's the one who made up the lies about weapons of mass destruction, and he knew he was lying. He knew it. He knew that his former company, Halliburton, was going to make millions. He was the one who defended torture on the prisoners of Abu Ghraib. Yeah, this is not a time to whitewash Dick Cheney, a world-class war criminal. If there's any justice in this world, he would have spent the rest of his life behind bars. So let's be clear about that. And let's not get confused about how to behave when bad people die. Someday, the orange meat puppet is going to die. And I'm going to hoot and holler and open my windows and bang pots and pans. And I'm going to go out in the street and I'm going to dance. And I'm going to join the party, and it's probably going to last for at least, a couple weeks. We're going to be thrilled when he keels over. And I make no apologies for that. None. When bad people die, you're not obliged to pretend you're not happy about it. I'm sorry if that offends your senses. You're probably a better person than I am. I fully admit that. Most people are much better people than I am. All right, that was a couple of clips from Thursday's show we didn't have time for on Thursday. The election of last week, the Miller-Vogt regime sent ICE agents to polling stations. Not cool. California, New Jersey. The appropriate outrage was expressed. Oh, the shutdown. I'm recording this early on Friday. You're hearing it probably much later. Who knows when you hear this exactly. I'm going to make a prediction. I predict the government shutdown will end this weekend. Maybe late Sunday night, some weird time. During Sunday Night Football, it'll end. During the third quarter of Sunday Night Football. That's my prediction. I think that it will not require the House to come back into session. Enough Democratic senators will cave, but Senate Republicans and Democrats will make an agreement where both of them can go to their base and claim victory. I think the Democrats will win on the extended ACA benefits. It'll be part of the deal. I don't know how they do this without bringing the House back into session, but that's my prediction. Something will happen that I don't understand. And that's an easy prediction to make because that happens all the time. And Republicans and the orange meat puppet will declare victory, but the real victory will be the extension of the benefits, which is what all the Democrats have been asking for. While the shutdown lasts, however, the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, has ordered grocery stores, and I don't remember when we entered a world where the government could order grocery stores to do anything. But they've ordered grocery stores, they've told them they cannot give SNAP recipients who are not getting their benefits, they've ordered grocery stores to not give discounts to SNAP beneficiaries. Because a lot of grocery store chains, wanting to help people out, were offering discounts to those who were finding themselves in trouble. SNAP benefits being withheld by the Miller-Vogt regime. They're unable to feed themselves and their children. And so there were, I guess, a few grocery stores or grocery store chains that were stepping up and saying, maybe we can help out a little bit. The Miller-Vogt regime threatened those grocery stores, said, no, you can't do that. 3 separate judges ordered SNAP benefits to be paid during the shutdown. The Miller-Vogt regime just simply refused. From the White House press room, lying Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said they would, and I think Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, said they would fund, at least partially. But the orange meat puppet, under the direction of Stephen Miller and the able hands of whoever thumbs out his text messages, said over and over again that no, not going to happen. So there's that. Do you remember the quote from Emma Goldman? Emma Goldman was one of our great social anarchists. Her famous quote, "Ask for work. If they don't give you work, ask for bread. If they do not give you work or bread, then take the bread." Absolutely. Good news from SCOTUS. It looks like they're going to put the kibosh on the orange meat puppet's ridiculous notion of tariffs. They finally put it in the official federal record here that tariffs are taxes and that only Congress can impose taxes on the American people. So Russell Vogt, co-dictator, you lost that one. The best thing to come out of that, the second best thing to come out of that, the oral arguments of last week, was the voice of U.S. Solicitor General John Sauer. Because if you go back and listen, you'll get a little smile. He sounds exactly like the character Bosley from the old TV show Charlie's Angels, if you're familiar. Quite a unique voice. Bosley was played by actor David Doyle. You may remember his iconic voice as Grandpa Lou in Rugrats. Yeah, it was kind of funny because, we can't get to... There's no video allowed, no TV cameras allowed in the Supreme Court chambers, so we can only listen. We can listen live, which I love because I love, me, I have a great affinity for audio only. And I got a great kick out of it that his voice, kind of a high-pitched, very gravelly voice, sounded just like David Doyle, Bosley from Charlie's Angels, or Grandpa Lou in Rugrats. I mentioned it in a comment thread of all people, Dahlia Lithwick. She's a fantastic writer. whose beat is the Supreme Court. That's her thing. And I'm lucky enough to be friends with her on social media. And I mentioned that in her thread. I hope she was okay with that. Didn't get mad at me for offering such a trivial, silly thing into her serious commentary. Anyway, I mentioned it that he sounds like Bosley. Somebody said, yeah, they thought he sounded like Charlie Day from Horrible Bosses. Another person says, I may be dating myself, but does anyone remember the little bald guy in 60s Westerns? He was mostly for comic relief. So I looked him up, and I found the guy she was thinking of. His name is Percy Helton. And yes, he did have a very sort of comical, high, gravelly voice. You might remember him if you're a fan of Christmas movies. He played Drunk Santa in the original Miracle on 34th Street, the 1947 version with Maureen O'Hara and Natalie Wood as the little girl. Yeah, this guy, Percy Helton, played in that first scene the Santa who was drunk at the Macy's Day Parade, which is why the real Santa, played by Edmund Gwenn, had to fill in. Percy Helton. And U.S. Solicitor General John Sauer making very serious arguments. Well, it turned out they weren't so serious. He was pretty well stumped by the questions. That's the bottom line of this story, at least the secondary story. I think the fact that he sounded like Bosley and Drunk Santa was the main story. But along with that, it looks like these silly tariffs and all the harm he's doing with them, he's going to lose the power. Of course, now we have to say, he ignores court orders, he finds workarounds, so it's not the greatest news in the world. It's good news, but does it change anything? Probably not. Nothing's going to change until we impeach this guy. So let's please keep our eyes on that. Let's get a non-MAGA majority in the House and the Senate, and let's impeach this guy. The boat murders are up to, as I speak, 17 boats blown out of the water, 69 people murdered in cold blood. The Orange Meat Puppet, Pete Hegseth, anybody else responsible for this has to be tried for war crimes and put behind bars. All right, I think that's probably all the time we have. Looking at the clock. Yeah. This has been Charles Purcell Presents, presenting excerpts from The Log that we didn't have time for last week, and a couple of other stories that I felt needed mention, with silly music in the background, which I thought was both appropriate and a welcome addition to the weekend show. All right, I love you. Get out of here. Go on. Credits are coming up here in a second. Here are the pre-recorded credits.
This episode of Charles Purcell Presents is available right now wherever you find your podcasts, or go to the website charlespurcell.com for the full archive and all the other series in the podcast family. Follow me on Blue Sky and Substack. Write to me at charlespurcell@gmail. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Theme music composed and performed by Peter Donalds. From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell.